Hello and welcome to Short Story Scene. I'm your host and storyteller, and here we have a tale called Charmides by Oscar Wilde, Part 1. He was a Grecian lad who, coming home with pulpy figs and wine from Sicily, stood at the galley's prow and let the foam blow through his crispy brown curls unconsciously, and holding wave and wind and boys despite, peered for the dripping sea across the wet and stormy night. Till with the dawn he saw a burned spear, like a thin thread of gold against the sky, and hoisted sail and strained the creaking gear, and bade the pilot head her lusty against the northwest gale, and all day long held on his way, and marked the rower's time with a measured song. And when the faint Carthian's hills were red, and dropped anchor in a little sandy bay, and with a fresh boughs of olive crowned his head, and brushed his cheeks and throat in horse spray, and washed the limbs with oil, and from the hold brought out the linen tunic and sandals brazen soled, with the rich robe stained with the fisher's juice, which with some swarthy trader he had brought. Upon the sunny quarry Syracuse, it was the Tyrian broideries in wrought, and by the questioning merchants made his way, and through the soft and silver woods, and when the laboring day. He had spun a tangled web of crimson cloud, combed in the high hill with a swift, silent feet, crept to the fane unnoticed by the crowd of busy priests, and from some dark retreat watched the young swains or the frolic playmates bring, and firsting on the little flock and the shy shepherd fling the crackling salt upon the flame or hang, and studded crooked against the temple wall, to her who keeps away the ravenous fang of the base wolf from the homestead and from the stall. And then the clear-voiced maidens gang to sing, and in the altar each man brought some goodly offering. A beechen cup brimming with milky foam, a fair cloth wrought with cunning imagery of hounds in chase, a waxen honeycomb, dripping with oozy gold which scarce to the bee had ceased from building a black skin of oil, meet the wrestlers of great boar of fierce and white tusk spoil, stolen from Artemis the jealous maiden, to please Athena in the dappled hide. One of tall stag who in some mountain glade had met the shaft, and then the herald cried, and from the pillar present one by one, and went the glad Greeks, well pleased that their simple vows had done. And the old priest put out the waning fires, save the one lamp whose restless ruby glowed forever in the cell, and the shrill lyres came fainter on the wind, and down the road on jealous dances, and the country folk did pass, and with the stout hands a warder closed the gates of polished brass. Long time had he lay, and hardly dared to breathe, and heard the caissons drip in the split-out wine, and the rose petals falling from the wreath, as the night breezes wandered through the shrine, and seemed to be in some entranced swoon, till through the open roof above the full of the brimming moon, flooded with sheeny waves of marble floor, when from the nook up leapt the venturous lad, and fling wide the cedar-craven door, and beheld the awful image saffron clad, and the armed for battle, and gaunt griffin glared from the huge helm, and the large lance and the reek of the rune flared. Like a red rod of flame, stony and steel, the Gorgon's head its laden eyeballs rolled, and withered its snaky horrors through the shield, and gaped aghast with bloodless lips, and cold, and passion impotent with the blind gaze, blinking owl between the feet hooved in shrill amaze. The lonely fisher, as he trimmed his lamp, far out at the sea of Sunbeam, or cast the net and tunnies, and heard the brazen tramp of horses smite the waves, and the wild blast divide the folded curtains of the night, and knelt upon the little poop, and prayed the holy fright. And guilty lovers in the venery forgat by little while there were stolen sweets, deeming they heard the dread Dian's bitter cry, and the grim watchmen on the lofty seats ran their shields in haste precipitate, and the strained black beard throats across the dusky parapet. For round the temple rolled and clanged of arms, and the 12 gods leapt up in marble fear, and the air quaked in the dissonant alarms, till the huge Poseidon shook his mighty spear, and on the fierce and prancing horses neighed, and the low tread and hurrying feet rang up from the conclave. Ready for death, with parted lips he stood, and well content in such a price to see that calm white brow and trembled maidenhood, and marvel of the pitiless chastity. Ah, well content indeed, for never wight since Troy's young shepherd prince had seen so wonderful a sight. Ready for death he stood, but lo, the air, great silent the horses ceased to neigh, and off the brow he tossed the clustering hair. From his limbs he threw the cloak away, or who not shook love make desperate, and nigher came and touched her throat, and with hands violate undid the cuirass and the corace's gown, and bared the breast of polished ivory, till from the waist and peplos fallen down, left visible in secret mystery, which to no lover will Athena show, and grand cool flanks and crescent thigh, and bossy hills of snow. Though who that never known the lover's sin, let them not read my ditty, it will be, and with the dull ears of musicless and thin, that they will have no joy of it, but ye. To whose wan cheeks now creeps the lingering smile? Ye who have learned whose Eros is, oh, listen yet a while. A little space he let his greedy eyes rest on the burnished image, till mere sight have swollen in the surfeit in such luxuries, and then his lips in hungering delight fed on her lips and round the towered neck. He flung his arms, now cared at all the passion's will to check. Never, I ween, did lover hold such thirst, for all night long he murmured honey-eyed word, and saw her sweet unravished limbs, and kissed her pale and argent body undisturbed, and paddled with the polished throat, and pressed his hot beating heart upon her chill and icy breast. It was as if Numidian javelins pierced through and through his wild and whirly brain, and his nerves thrilled like throbbing violins in exquisite pulsation and pain, and such a sweet anguish that he never drew his lips from her till overhead the lark of waning flew. They who have never seen the daylight peer into darkened room and drawn the curtain, and with dull eyes and wearied from some dear and worship body risen, then the certain, and never know of what I try to sing, how long the last kiss was, how fond the late his lingering. The moon was girdled with a crystal rim, the sign which shipmen say is ominous of wrath in heaven, and wan stars were dim, and the low-lying east was tumultuous, and the faint fluttering wings of flying dawn, ere from the silent somber shrine his lover had withdrawn. Down the steep rock with a hurried feet and fast combed the brave lad, and reached the cave of Pan, and heard the goat-foot snoring as he passed, and leapt upon the grassy knoll, and ran like a young fawn until the olive wood, which the shadowy valley of the well-built city stood, and saw a little stream, from which well he knew that oftentimes the boyish careless shout the green the chested griffin would pursue, or snare a woven net of silver trout. Then down amid the startled reed he lay, panting in breathless sweet fright, and waited for the day. On the green bank he lay, and let one hand dip in the cold dark eddies listlessly, and soon the breath of morning came and feigned, and hot flushed cheeks, and lifted wantonly, and tangled curls from oft his forehead, while he on the running water gazed with strange and secret smile, And soon the shepherd in a rough woolen cloak, with a long crook undid the wattle coats, and from the stack of thin blue wreath of smoke go through the air across the ripened oats, and the hilly yellow house dog bayed, as though the crisp and rustling fern the heavy cattle strayed. And when the light foot mower went afield across the meadows laced with threaded dew, and the sheep bleated on the misty Wilde, and from its nest in waking corncrake flew, some women saw him lying by the stream, and marveled much that any lad so beautiful could seem, nor deemed him born of mortals, or one said, "It is young Hylas, and the false runaway, who with the Naiad now that would make him bed, forgetting Hercules, but nor nay, it is Narcissus, his own paramour, those with fond crimson lips no woman can allure." And when nearer they came, a third one cried, "It is young Dionysus, who has hid his spear of fawn skin in the riverside, wearing the hunting with a bassarid, and wise indeed were we away to fly. They live no longer who on the gods immortal come to spy." So turned they back and feared to look behind, and told a timid swain who they were seen amid the reeds come woodland god reclined, and no one dared to cross the open green, and on the day no olive tree was slain, no rushes cut, and all deserted was the fair domain. Save when the neat herds led his empty pail, he slung upon his back, with leap and bound, raced up the other side, and stopped to hail, hoping that he some comrade new had found, and gat no answer, and half afraid, passed his simple way, or down the still and silent glade. A little girl ran laughing from the farm, not thinking of love's secret mysteries, and when she saw the white and gleaming arm, and all his manhood, with longing eyes, whose passion mocked her sweet virginity, watched him a while, and then stole back sadly and wearily. Far off he heard the city's hum and noise, and now and then the shriller laughter where the passionate purity of brown-limbed boys wrestled or raced in the clear, healthy, full air. And now and then a little tinkling bell, and the sure withered led the sheep down the mossy well. Through the gray willows danced a fretful gnat, and the grasshopper chirped idly from the tree, and sleekly oiled coat of water rat, breasting on the little ripples manfully, made the wild duck's nest from burrow to burrow, and hopped the shy finch, and a huge tortoise crept across the slough. On the faint wind floated the silky seeds. As the bright sickle swept through the waving grass, the ozil cock splashed circles in reeds, and flecked the silver whorls of forest glass, and which scarce caught again is imaginary, ere from the bed in dusky trench leapt at the dragonfly. But little care had he for anything, though up and down the beach a squirrel played, before the copse of linen gang to sing to its brown mate its sweetest serenade. Little care indeed, for he had seen the breasts of Pallas and the naked wonder of the queen. But when the herdsman called his struggling goats, and the whistling pipe across the rocky road, and the sharp beetle with its trumpet notes boomed through the darkened woods, and seemed to bode of coming storm, and belated crane passed homeward like a shadow, and the dull big drops of rain fell on the pattering fig leaves. Up he rose, from the gloomy forest went his way, past somber homestead and wet orchid close, and came upon the last unto the little quay, and called his mates abroad, and took his seat on a high poop, and pushed from the land a loosened dripped sheet, and steered across the bay. And when 9 suns passed down the long and laddered way of gold, and 9 pale moons had bathed their orisons, and chaste stars and confessors or told their dearest secrets to the downy moth that will not fly at noon through the foam and surging froth, Came a great owl with yellow sulphurous eyes, and lit upon the ship, whose timbers creaked, and through the laden of the 3 argosies, where in the hold and flapped the wings and shrieked. The darkness straightway stole across the deep. Sheath of the Ryan's sword, dread Mars himself fled down the steep. And the moon hid behind the tawny mask of drifting cloud, and from ocean's marge rose in red plume and huge and horned casque the 7-cribbed spear and the brazen targe, and the clad in bright and burnished panoply Athena strode across the stretch of sick and shivering sea. To a dull sailor's sight her loosened looks seemed like a jagged storm rack, and her feet only the spume of the floats on hidden rocks, and markings how the rising waters beat against the rolling ship. And pilot cried, the young helmsman at the stern, to loft the windward side. But he, the overbold adulterer, and dear profaner in great mysteries, and a dear amorous eliter, and he beheld those grand relentless eyes, laughed aloud in joy, and crying out, I come. I leapt from the lofty poop until the chill and churning foam. Then fell from the high heaven one bright star, when Dancer left the circling galaxy, and back to Athens and her clattering car, and all the pride and ventured divinity. Pale Peloponnese swept with a shrill and sleeky clink, and a few gargling bubbles rose where her body lover sank. And the mast shuddered as the gaunt owl flew, with mocking hoots after the wrathful queen, and the old pilot bade in trembling crew hoist the big sail, and told how he had seen, close to the stern, a dim and giant form, and like a dipping shallow of the stout ship dashed through the storm. No man dared to speak of Charmides, deeming that he some evil thing had wrought. And when he reached the strait Symplegades, and reached the galley and the shore that sought, and told gate and city hastily, and in the market showed her brown and pictured pottery. And that concludes our tale, part 1 of Charmides by Oscar Wilde. If you like this content and like to support it, please head on Patreon. That is www.patreon.com/shortstoryscene. I'd like to thank my patron Jack for all your help, and thank you all for listening. See you next episode. Bye!